Hello and welcome to Flixplained, the channel where we take your favourite flicks and series and break them down for you to ensure you don't miss a single detail.
How did it just disappear?
The boy! That thing he had, the pyramid. I know that sounds crazy, but he somehow stopped time with it.
Today we're going to be discussing Netflix's new series 1899. And 17 facts about the first season that you might have missed. This goes without saying, but if you haven't had a chance to watch the show, beware. This video contains major spoilers. That being said, make sure you stick around until the end of the video to find out about how one of the last things that Maura saw was a major hint to what we might see in season 2 of 1899. White Rabbit. First up, let's take a look at the music that's heard throughout the season. Not only is the opening theme significant, with it being a cover of Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit by Elliot Sumner, but the end of every episode of the series has a song that's either about mankind or how complex the human mind is. Every song acts as a symbol for the episode that was ending, or as a hint to what we were going to see in the following episode. Ake's name is an anagram. Something else you should know about 1899 is that double meanings can be found everywhere, even in the characters' names. Fans of the series that are good at word puzzles quickly realised that Captain Ake's name was actually an anagram for the word key, which is what Maura needed to find to escape the simulation. But there's more to the captain's name than just that. His last name, Larson, is also a reference to the Larson effect, which is an audio term that is basically a feedback loop. And as you know if you finished 1899, the entire series was about a simulation that will loop back the same 8 days over and over again. The Unnamed Sister. Next up, throughout the show, we learned a few interesting things about the ships that were involved, including the fact that not only was the Prometheus and Kerberos purchased by Maura's father, but they also had a sister ship that was identical to the two of them. However, the sister ship never gets an actual name in the series, and some fans are beginning to believe that it was a reference to the Prometheus spaceship that we saw at the end of season 1. The meaning behind the ships' names. Like most things in 1899, the names of the two ships that the show centered around have much deeper meanings. First, you have Kerberos, the ship that Maura and the other passengers were traveling on. Well, Kerberos actually has two different connections when it comes to the show. One is its connection to a support system that is built into almost every major operating system on the market today that shares the same name as that ship. And the second is its connection to the mythical Greek beast known as Cerberus, the multi-headed dog that was tasked with guarding the gates of the underworld. Then you have Kerberos' twin ship, Prometheus. Prometheus is another being from ancient Greek mythology. He was the Titan who went against the will of the gods and gave humanity fire in order to help it advance as a civilization. Sort of how the Prometheus in 1899 was where Maura found Elia, the child who helped her make it out of the simulation, presumably advancing her state of being. The liver connection. The connection to Prometheus also runs a bit deeper when you find out that in the mythos, as a punishment for giving mankind fire, Prometheus had his liver eaten by an eagle over and over again. This is because in ancient Greece, it was believed that the liver was the root of all human emotion. And interestingly enough, Maura's father Henry hinted that he believed the simulation kept repeating itself because every decision made by the passengers was driven by their emotions rather than logic. And thus, the passengers were destined to live the same cycle simulated over and over again, just like the Titan. The pyramid symbol was a big clue. Now let's talk about one of the first clues that Maura got on how to put an end to the simulation, and one of the first big symbols throughout the season, the black stone pyramid that Elliot gave her. As we found out toward the end of the season, the pyramid was a device that when paired with a key, would free Maura and thus free everyone else from the simulation. Now, when you look at all of the symbols of pyramids scattered throughout 1899, you'll notice that a lot of them have a line going through their peaks. This could be an indication of how the pyramid device works, as you have to open the peak of the stone as if it were a lid to a jar. Up next, let's talk about one of the more obvious clues. That 1899 is a show centered around a woman who needs to wake up from her own life's illusion and face reality, comes in a form of a book titled The Awakening. This book, which was written by Kate Chopin, and actually released in the year 1899, is in the possession of one of the characters in the show, and is referenced multiple times as a way for the showrunners to tell the audience what the basic premise of the show is going to be about. It's not the end, quote. Another instance where the showrunners subtly let us know that the series wasn't actually taking place in the year 1899 was through some of the quotes that we heard the characters reciting. Specifically, the interaction between Yuk-Yi and Ling-Yi, when Yuk-Yi said, "Things will get better in the end, and if they don't, it's not the end." Not only was that an indication of the 8-day time loop that they were in while inside the simulation, but the quote itself wasn't actually written until a Portuguese author used it in the 1900s. And then it wasn't made famous in pop culture until the Beatles' John Lennon in the late 1900s. Hidden binary. Alright, now I want to talk about all of the hidden binary codes that can be found throughout the first season. Binary code is a combination of ones and zeros that tell computers and other electronics what they should be doing in order to perform proper operations. In layman's terms, binary code is what makes up every bit of software. You can see examples of binary on things like Mora's doorway, which has the number 1011, which is binary code for the number 11. And if you take a closer look at the messages that the first mate sent to Henry, you'll notice that they were essentially speaking in binary. The Beetle was a coding bug. While we're talking about coding, let's talk about glitches. When something goes wrong with a computer program or game, it's known as a glitch. But do you know what a common term for a glitch is? It's a bug. Only in the case of 1899, it comes in the shape of a literal bug. The Beetle that we see multiple times throughout the show that seems to lead the passengers where they needed to go to progress the simulation is a glitch in the system and quite literally a bug. The singleton pattern. Now let's take a look at the last name of the main family in 1899. Henry and Mora's last name is Singleton, which actually has a strong connection of its own to software engineering. The singleton pattern refers to a software design pattern. The showrunners likely used the last name as a hint that what we were seeing throughout season 1 was simply a coded simulation. Alfred helped Elliot figure things out. Up next, let's talk some more about the Beetle that we saw pop up throughout the series. As we saw in episode 8, Elliot was about to trap the bug and named him Alfred when his mother, Mora, stopped him and explained that he needed to set it free to live naturally. And after doing so, Alfred is set free and ended up leading Elliot to Henry, who inadvertently helped Elliot realize that he was just a character in a simulation, much like the Beetle led others along their paths throughout the season. Chiron and Karen. Now, one character that we never actually got to meet, but heard a bit about, was Mora's brother Chiron. He was the one responsible for leading Mora onto the ship in the first place with his lair. At least, that's what she believed. Interestingly enough, Chiron sounds a lot like the name Karen. Karen is another figure in ancient Greek mythology that was believed to be the ferryman who led souls across the river Styx in Acheron. Coincidence? I think not. Hand problems. Next up, I'm not sure if you were paying attention to the characters' hands in the show, but a lot of them happen to have strange issues centered around their hands. For instance, when Lucian has a seizure, his hands appear to be more sporadic. Then there was the point in the show when we learned that Virginia's hand had gotten infected by the black goo. And even Captain Ake had tremors in his hands, which were one of the indicators of his alcoholism. The placement of Elliot's tattoo. Another interesting idea comes from the placement of the upside down triangle tattoo that we saw behind Elliot's ear. If you take a look at the tattoo, it's placed at the exact same spot where the supposedly real version of Mora had injected him with a syringe full of black liquid that seemed to erase his memory. And then, when Mora went to touch the tattoo and examine it after finding Elliot on the Prometheus, he stopped her and even looked as if he was angry that she went near it, almost as if Elliot's body remembered what she had done to him. 1899 was the most expensive German show ever produced. Now, you most likely know that 1899 was created by the same people that produced the hit series Dark, which ended up becoming one of the most critically acclaimed German shows of all time. And even though the cast and characters of 1899 are all from around Europe, it too is actually a German show. That being said, because of how much the first season cost to produce, 1899 has already become the most expensive German series to be ever produced. This is no short thanks to Netflix, who provided the majority of the budget for the series. A letter from Chiron. Last but not least, we have what I think was a massive hint to what's going to happen in Season 2 of 1899. If you remember toward the beginning of the first season, we learned that Mora was on the Kerberos because she received a letter from her brother Chiron that led her there. In fact, that was one of the first things that she saw after waking up on board the ship. Well, in the final moments of Season 1, after Mora woke up on the spaceship in 2099, one of the first things she saw was a message from her brother. There is a good chance that this is an indication that she didn't actually wake up from the simulation and simply just broke through a layer of it. In other words, in Season 2, we might find out that they are still in the simulation, just now in a different setting. What was your favourite part of 1899? Make sure you let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to check out our other video explaining everything that you might have missed in Season 1 of 1899.